Hi everyone. In today's lesson we're going to be focusing on conversions. It's a very important part in many of our sections in maths literacy, and it is important that you're able to do conversions. Now in South Africa we use a measuring system called the metric system. Now the metric system works in multiples of 10 and is very easy to work with. We also have some countries that work with a different system, and that's actually called an imperial system. Now the imperial system does not work in multiples of 10s and can be more difficult to manipulate. Now we will be dealing with that in greater detail in the next lesson. But for now, let's have a look at different units that we have in both the metric and the imperial system. On the left hand side of the screen you can see the metric units have been listed. Now we basically start with our grams and our milligrams. I'll show you in a minute how these are actually all linked. The equivalent in imperial, if you're looking at more or less the same size, is what we call ounces, and you can see that after each of them here I have put down what the different abbreviations are. So ounces is OZ. We have kilograms, and equivalent to kilograms in the imperial system we have pounds. Now the abbreviation for pounds is LB. Now there's one measure that is quite popular in the UK that gets used a lot, and that is a stone. Now a stone can't be abbreviated. There are quite a few here that actually can't be abbreviated, and it stays as a stone. Now this is a measurement that we're not very familiar with, but essentially a stone is about 6.35 kilograms, so it's a lot more than a kilogram. We then have the 2 tons, the one in the metric and in the one in the imperial. Now the metric ton is spelled with a double NE, it's not abbreviated, and the imperial ton is just a single ton. We then in the metric system have our centimeters and millimeters. You work with these two a lot, and these two we basically equivalent to the inches, which is abbreviated IN, and if you do a plural it's going to have an S on. The next we have meters, and in the imperial we have feet and yards. Now there are 3 feet in 1 yard, so 3 of those is equal to 1 yard, and just over 3 feet gives us a meter. The equivalent for our kilometer is miles, and notice miles is MILES. We can't abbreviate it to M because remember M is our standard abbreviation for meters. Then when it comes to area we have hectare and we have acre. Those there are our 2 equivalents there. Then when it gets to volume we've got milliliters, which is the same as fluid ounces, and fluid ounces is FL with an OZ. We have liters and pints, and then of course we have kiloliters and gallons. As you know, petrol in the US is in fact measured in gallons. Today we're going to be concentrating on the metric system. Now the metric system, you are not given your abbreviation, so what happens is you have to know the conversions from one to the other. Now I have a little rhyme that I like to use, and it goes something like this. Let's do the measure ones first. So it basically goes: King Henry died a miserable death called measles. Now if we have a look at this, this is your K is for your kilometers. So this is kilometers. We then have hectometers, decameters, which we don't use very much. We then have our normal meters. These are decimeters, these are our centimeters, and these are our millimeters. When it comes to liquid measure, we're going to be do quite a similar thing, but what we're going to do then is we're going to say that King Henry, he also died, but this time he died a lousy death called measles. Now this of course is going to be our kiloliters. We're going to hectare and decaliters. We have our liters, our deci, our centiliters, which we don't use much, and our milliliters. Then when it comes to mass, then we have the following rhyme: King Henry died a gross death called measles. And in this one we're dealing with weight here, or mass, so it's going to be kilograms, hectare and decagrams. There's our plain grams, decigrams, centigrams and milligrams. Okay, so now you can see that's quite a nice easy rhyme to be able to remember them. So there are your lengths, your volume and your weight measurements. Now the important thing to know with this is how to actually use these. Now what happens is when you convert from the top coming down, then our units are getting smaller, and so for each for each jump that we go from the top over there, we are going to multiply by 10. So we multiply by 10 for each one that goes down. So when we're going from grams down to milligrams, we have got 3 jumps. So here you are going to be multiplying by 1,000. Whereas when you're going from the bottom up, your units are busy getting bigger. So what we have to do this time is we are going to divide by 10. So if you want to change from centimeters to meters, they're going to do 2 jumps there. So what you're going to be doing there is dividing by 100. Okay, now let's have a look at some examples. First, let's convert 2,3 kilometers to meters and then to millimeters. If we have a look at our conversions, we've got King Henry died a miserable death called measles. If you say this enough to yourself, it becomes quite easy. Okay, so we want to go from kilometers down to meters. So we've got 3 over here, so we're going downwards, so we have to, the units are getting smaller, we have to multiply. So we're going to be multiplying by 1,000 there, and then to go from meters down to meters, we are also going to be multiplying by 1,000. So take this, multiply by 1,000. You can do it in your calculator, but it's not difficult. When you're multiplying by 1,000, you've got 3 zeros, so we have to move the decimal places 3. So it's going to become 2, that's 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places, 3 decimal places. So 2,3 kilometers is 2,300 meters. Then to go from your meters down to our millimeters, you have to multiply by another 1,000, which means adding on an extra 3 zeros. So that gives us 2,300,000 millimeters. Let's convert 22 liters, and we're going to convert that to kiloliters. So now, going from liters to kiloliters, we are going from a smaller unit to a larger unit, so we are going to have to divide. So we're going to take the 22, we are going to divide that by 1,000. Now, on the calculator in fraction form is going to give us 11 over 500. You can, of course, if you want to, you can actually convert it to a decimal, and you could write it as 0,022. And then this, of course, is going to be kiloliters. Please remember, it's very important in Mathslit to always make sure that you have your units on. Let's look at a slightly more difficult example. My dog Gemma eats 130 grams of dog food twice a day. How many kilograms of food does she eat in a week? So first of all, we need to know, in 1 week, how many days do we have? So in 1 week, we have 7 days. Okay, so what is she going to eat in 7 days? So it's going to be 7 days multiplied by, we've got 130 grams, but it says that she gets fed twice a day. Have a look over here. So we've got to take that and we've got to multiply that by 2. Okay, so now let's use our calculator and let's see what that comes to. So it's 7 times 130 times 2, and that gives us 1,820 grams. So this is going to be 1,820 grams. But now the question said, how many kilograms of dog food does she eat in a week? So we've got to take that and we convert that grams to kilograms. So of course, converting that the grams to kilograms, we have to divide by 1,000. So if you count your decimal places, 1, 2, 3, it's going to be 1,82 kilograms per week is what she's going to be eating. Let's make the exercise a little bit more complicated. Let's say the food comes in 7.5 kilogram bags and it costs 308 Rand per bag. How much will it cost to feed Gemma for a year? Now, in 1 year, how many days do we have? We have got 365 days. So we've got to go 365 days. Okay, how much does she eat per day? Well, it's 130 per meal, and that's going to be twice a day. So what is that going to give us? 365, we've got to multiply that by 130 and multiply that by 2. Now, that of course gives us the number of grams. So let's immediately go and change that into kilograms and divide that by 1,000. Remember, it's 3 jumps if you have a look at what we had. So let's change that into a decimal format so we can see. So it's 94,9 kilograms. So this is going to give us 94,9 kilograms. Now, we need to have a look at this. It tells us that the food comes in 7.5 kilo bags and it costs 308 Rand per bag. So we need to work out how many bags we're going to need. So what are we going to do? We've got to take the 94.9. So go 94.9 kilograms, and we're going to divide it by each bag is 7.5. So let's see what that is. We've got our answer on our calculator. So we're just going to go divide by 7.5, and that gives us, we change that to our decimal, 12.65 bags. So that of course is an approximate amount. So that is 12.65 bags. Now, of course, we can't buy 12.65 bags, so we're going to have to round this up. Now, this is important for you to remember in literacy, that even if this had been 12.2 bags, because we want enough, we want to know what the cost is for the total year, we would have to round up. Okay, so in other words here, we are going to have to buy 13 bags of dog food. So 13 bags, and it is 308 Rand per year. And that is going to be, let's clear this again here. So it's going to be 13 times 308, and that gives you 4,004 Rand. So it's 4,004 Rand. So it's quite expensive to have an animal, and it is your responsibility, so make sure that you do that. Let's look at some more common conversions that we can get. Sometimes a recipe book does not come in milliliters or liters. A lot of recipes actually give ingredients in these sizes. So that, for example, they say a cup. Now, a cup is 250 milliliters. 1 tablespoon, often abbreviated just to a capital T, is 15 milliliters approximately. A teaspoon is 5 milliliters. A half a teaspoon is 2 milliliters. And when they say a quarter teaspoon, we talk about 1 milliliter. Okay, now let's have a look at a recipe. So here's a recipe for a cake that has to be baked. Now you can see that here it talks about a cup of butter, half a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 cups of sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, 3 eggs. There's a cup again. Here we have a teaspoon of soda. Here we have tablespoon, and there we have more cups. So let's convert some of these. So if we were to convert this one over here, this half a teaspoon of salt, what are we talking about? Half a teaspoon of salt would be 2 milliliters using our conversion that we've got up here. If you wanted 1.5 tablespoons of half water, what would you have to do there? You would have to go 1.5, and you would multiply that by, a tablespoon is 15 milliliters, so it would be multiplied by 15. And if you go and do that on your calculator, let's get that in here. 15 times 1.5 gives you, and let's convert that to 22.5. So there we have that. This is going to be approximately 22.5 milliliters. Now, a lot of recipe books will actually give you these conversions in the front, so it's not that difficult. You can go and have a look to see how those can actually be converted.